In UniFi Network Controller, if you go to Security, General, you can see the country restriction. If you enable it, you can block some particular countries if you want. And if you go to the traffic rule, you can create country-related traffic rule as well. See, you can block, allow, or to do speed limit. And if you go to the insights, you can see this geo map. You can see your devices communicated with which countries. All these settings, features, they are related to one thing, which is called GeoIP. Let's first do some very simple testing to see how GeoIP works in action. As you can see from the map, in the past 1 hour, I only communicated with US IP addresses. In the lower part of the screen, let me ping cbc.ca. So just from the name, it seems it should be a Canadian website. Let me ping it. Okay, multiple minutes passed. Let me refresh the display. Okay, I only see one country added to the blue color, which is Japan. Interesting. What I'm pinging is a Canadian website, but Japan shows up. Before testing another website, I want to reset the map. Go to Security Setting, Traffic Identification, Clear History. Then if we go back to the map, you can see it's reset. Then let me ping another address, canada.ca. It is a government website, I assume. Let's see what's the result for this run. Okay, after 1.5 minutes, I refreshed the map. Now you can see Canada is showing in blue color. Then let's see if I want to restrict the country by blocking Canada. Then in the client, if I ping cbc.ca, I can still ping it. Then let me try another one, canada.ca. Okay, for this one, I cannot ping it. So after this several short testings, you may be wondering how GeoIP works from technical perspective and how the country restriction is implemented in the backend. So let's discuss it. Let's look into the interesting relationship between DPI and GeoIP. From the UniFi Network Controller under Security General, if I enable country restriction, let me select a random country, apply changes. You may know this option, traffic identification. In fact, it's used to enable or disable the DPI. If I disable it, you see the warning. It doesn't mention anything about GeoIP. If I choose to disable it, apply changes, you can see the country restrictions is still enabled, which means the country restriction doesn't depend on DPI. However, on the other hand, you may remember in the very beginning of the video, when I clear history for the DPI, it does clear the history for GeoIP related statistics. So that means the GeoIP is somehow related to DPI. To find out more information in the right side, let me SSH into the UniFi gateway. In my case, it's a UXG Pro in my lab environment. Okay, I mean, go to the DPI folder. It's under user share DPI. If you list the directory, you can see it does have a GeoIP folder. Go to GeoIP. Then there is only one important big file. Just from the file extension, you can see it's a database file. Unfortunately, it's not a pure text file. So we cannot really tell what's inside it without doing some database export-import work. However, this file name may give us some hint. If you Google this file name, especially GeoLite2, you will find the website for MaxMind. In fact, internally, Ubiquiti does use the database provided by this company, even though from Ubiquiti we can only get the database format file, right? From this company, you can directly download a pure text, a CSV file. That will help us understand how GeoIP works in Ubiquiti's gateway. In the right side, you can see I already downloaded the CSV files for GeoLight 2 from this company. You can see it has two types of files. The first type, the database itself, it has the so-called IP address block, then the two so-called geo names. The first geo name is for registered country. The second geo name is for represented country. Later, we will find out what's the difference between these countries, right? In most cases, they are the same, but in some cases, they are not. Okay, this is the first type of file, the database, right? Then there are another type of file. It's a simple definition of ISO country code. So you have all the different language description and the ISO code for a country. That's it. Very simple, right? So now we understand what's the database. Let's go back to the two testings we did in the very beginning. Let's see why for the two Canadian websites, we see totally different behaviors. Let's check Canada.ca first. So let me use dig to get its IP address. Okay, let me pick a random one. Then in the right side, the database, let me search for it. Remember, the granularity is by IP blocks. You won't find individual IP, so you need to find the block. 205.193 belongs to this huge block. You can see the two country code. They are the same. Both the registered and the represented countries, they are the same one. So then let's see what's this country at all. Copy it, then search it in another country ISO file. Okay, it is Canada. So that's why for this particular Canada.ca website, it works when we want to restrict Canada, right? And it can also show up in the map as in Canada. But what about the other one? cbc.ca. Okay, I got this IP address. Then let's search for it. This IP address belongs to this particular block. Then let's see the two country code. Interestingly, they are different. So then let's see what's the first one, the registered in country. So copy it, search for it. Yeah, it's Japan. It's registered in Japan. Then let's see what's the represented country? United States. Even though the domain name is .ca, both country codes are not Canada. That's why during our testing on the map, it shows as Japan. And when we restrict Canada in the country restrictions, it didn't restrict this particular website. Okay, now everything's clear, right? You cannot simply tell a country by the domain name. You have to look into the GeoIP database to find out the registered in country and the represented country. To restrict the access of IP addresses from a particular country, you have two ways to do that. You can create traffic rule and you can block, allow, speed limit a country, right? Another way is you can go to the security general setting, do the country restriction here. Let's look into their technical implementations to understand whether they even have any differences. And let's understand how technically they work. Later, we will discuss from functional perspective whether the traffic rule and general country restrictions, whether they have any functional differences. So first, let's look into the general country restriction. This time, let me block US. Okay, I want to enable country restrictions, block United States, apply. So then in the lower part of the screen, let me show you where the restriction is implemented. It is within the IP tables, just like firewall rules. So let me run IP tables, show you the filter table, show you the details, show you the content, number format. Okay, so you can see a long list of existing IP table rules, but the GeoIP related ones are very clearly included in the chains which have GeoIP in the names. See this chain? is for in. It has a whole bunch of rules. We will look into the details later. And another chain is here, is for out. Let's see what's included in the chains at all. The one which is close to the end will catch your eyes. See here, it has GeoIP in this part. So let's try to understand what's this rule about. It's a drop rule. That makes sense, right? We want to block that country. And it's from everywhere to everywhere. See, this -m means it will use a kernel module, and the module name is called GeoIP, and this is parameter to use this module. The source country is US. This is exactly what we set on the UI, right? Let's dig deeper to understand this Linux kernel module, which is called GeoIP. See, I want to list all the kernel modules, but I'm only interested in the ones for Geo. Okay, there's only one. See, what's the name? It's called XT-GeoIP. It's a free implementation for GeoIP. And if you want to see the parameters, we can run IP tables, specify the module name, GeoIP, and you can see the help. You can specify the source country, destination country, right? Ubiquiti uses this parameter, source country, okay? And of course, internally, this XT-GeoIP module will use the GeoIP database, which we discussed earlier. Of course, the XT-GeoIP kernel module cannot directly use the CSV file, which we looked into earlier about the GeoIP database, right? But in the SSH session, if we go to XT-table add-ons folder, you can see some utilities. So basically, you can build the database used by XT-GeoIP by using the CSV files we checked earlier. I believe that's the way how Ubiquiti utilize those downloaded GeoIP database files. Then let's go back to the IP tables. I'm not sure whether you noticed a strange situation. See the UniFi network controller? You can tell from this UI, I'm accessing it remotely. I assume its server is in the US. So now you can see this is still running fine, which means the server, the US server, can still communicate with my local gateway. But we already blocked US, right? Why the US server can still communicate with this gateway? It is related to how the rule is implemented. See the rule we just found, this one, is at the very end of this chain. See the rule right before this GeoIP rule? It will allow established connection from anywhere to anywhere. In our case, we enabled the country restrictions after we already connected to the Ubiquiti's remote server. So then this rule will be effective before the GeoIP rule, which means our communication will still be allowed, even though we already disabled US. This is for in chain. Then for out chain, you see the same situation. So there's a rule before this GeoIP rule. It will enable the established connection. This explains the behavior we are seeing now. Even though we disable the US, we can still communicate with the Ubiquiti's remote server. But if now, let me launch a brand new session using a different browser. Let's say this Firefox. Let me visit unifi.ui.com. See, it cannot access it anymore because the rules only allow established connection. But now we are starting a brand new session and this new connection is not allowed anymore because the website is in the US. So we just checked the country restriction implementation, right? Now let me revert it back. Then go to the traffic rule. Let's create a traffic rule to block US. Here as a region, then select US as the region. I need to select device or network. Let me choose all devices, add rule. Okay, now we have a block US traffic rule. Go back to the SSH session. Now let's see how the IP tables are changed. By the way, see the browser, it is refreshing and it cannot connect to the Ubiquiti's remote server anymore. Interesting, right? We already see a different behavior. We will find out why this time we cannot connect to the Ubiquiti's remote server. But let's still continue our IP table investigation. The technical implementation for traffic rule is different. For example, for the in chain, I see our traffic rule here and it's implemented in a different way. So this time it utilized match set. And even though it is still using the GeoIP, this time it is specifying destination country instead of source country. The technical reason why for traffic rule it use match set is, remember when we define the traffic rule, we need to specify which VLANs or which devices, right? That feature is not available in the general country restrictions. To achieve that device selection feature, you have to use match set. This is for in group. And keep in mind, this drop rule is in the beginning of the chain. And in the whole IP tables, this rule only appears once. It's not in the out user chain. Then let's try to understand how it can drop the connections for two directions, in and out. This particular LAN in user, let's see where it is used. LAN in user is in forward in user. And forward in user is called by forward user hook. Forward user hook is called by forward jump. And forward jump is called by forward. This is the starting point, which means no matter what's the direction, as long as it's forward, this drop US rule will be applied. Okay, now let's explain why for this traffic rule implementation, our connection is broken for the remote access. That's because this rule is very brutal. There's no rule to allow the established connection. Let's go back to this drop rule. See, before it, we don't have a rule to allow the established connection. So that's why our connection is broken. To continue to use UniFi network controller, I have to launch a local connection. Let me do it now. Now in the lower part of the screen, I am accessing the local cloud key. So that's why I can connect to it. Then let me choose this rule and remove it. Then you will see in the upper part, the remote connection session, it will be successful after I refresh it. It's back, okay? Next, let's look into another interesting situation. So now I have the blocking US setting enabled, right? Then from a regular client, let me ping a US IP address, for example, 8888. Okay, it's not pingable, it's expected, right? But let me switch to the SSH session. So if I ping the same 8888 here, I'm pinging it from inside the gateway, not from a client. Let's see what will happen. Ping it. See, it's pingable. It's a miracle, right? Or is it a bug? Let's look into that to see what really happened. So in the SSH session, let me run the same IP tables command to display the filter table. Okay, depending on where we run the ping command, the IP table chains that the packet will follow will be different. Just to help us understand the flow, I draw the left side diagram. So the upper side is for the case where I ping 8888 from inside the gateway. Because I'm running it from inside the gateway, the packet was locally generated, right? So then it will go through the output chain. Let's scroll to the beginning. See, this is the output chain. It will call the output jump as I show in the diagram, right? Then what's output jump? It's here. As you can see, it's a blank chain. So basically, if the packet is locally generated from the gateway, when it go outside, it doesn't have any rule applied. So that's why we can still ping 8888 because the GeoIP rule doesn't apply to this packet. Okay, it's a super simple flow. But if we ping 8888 from a client, situation will be dramatically different because the packet was not generated by the gateway. To the gateway is an incoming packet. because the local client generated that packet, right? So then it will go through the IP table's forward chain. This is the starting point for forward chain. It will call the forward jump, and the forward jump will call these 3 different chains. The third chain, it doesn't have the GeoIP related rules, so we will skip it for this discussion. I draw the details for the forward in GeoIP precheck and the forward out GeoIP precheck in the diagram. So we can see, for example, why we cannot ping 8888 in this example, because when the packet is in the out GeoIP chain, let me show you in the right side SSH. Okay, when the packet is inside this chain, the source is anywhere, right? And then the destination, it doesn't meet any conditions of the rules before this drop rule. So this particular rule will apply, right? So that's why the ping packet will be dropped. I hope by reading this extremely simplified diagram, you can understand why in the 2 situations the ping behaved differently. By the way, if you use traffic rule instead of the general country restrictions, the result will be the same. So I won't waste your time to talk about that. Now let's briefly talk about from functional perspective, whether they have the same features. See, this is the security general country restrictions. You can only block allow. But when it comes to directions, you have the flexibility of choosing outgoing or incoming. But when it comes to traffic rule, for the region rule, you can select block or allow, which is the same as the general setting. You have another feature. You can do the speed limiting. Additionally, there's a major difference for traffic rule. You have the flexibility to only apply the traffic rule to specific VLAN or to specific devices. This feature sometimes is very handy, but it's not available in the general country restriction case. So based on what's your requirement and based on all the differences we already discussed in this video, you can make different choices when you want to do the country limitation. Okay, so this is the end for the video. Thanks for watching.